Here we go. 17 minutes past the hour.
Sorry we're late.
Very late, but we have been working along with this computer that today earlier on froze during the Italian show, so I needed to fix it a little bit. I hope now it's gonna be fine. Okay, so welcome to the Leo Zagami show, Saturday 6th of May of the year of the Lord 2023 with Leo and Christy Zagami here for the Leo Zagami show, and of course exploring the Illuminati Occult part 18, Quest for the Holy Grail. So this is a very important episode for us. Let me check that the microphone is set up okay. Here, it wasn't, just a second. So we can get it. I can get all these technical things sorted before we take off, and now we can start with our, how you say, soundtrack, our opening theme. Here we go with La Danse Macabre. Today was, of course, a very special day for the royalists, for those people who follow the British royals, and
I was dancing.
and of course we have seen what has happened with King Charles going on for hours in this seemingly tedious and laborious ritual, which of course is part of the tradition. And one thing we will be discussing today, the Holy Grail, goes back to the Arthurian legends, and some way it's connected to the English crown. Let's thank our sponsors first of all. Let's thank our sponsors, Bruce, Kodish, and
Pina.
Thank you so much, guys, for giving us this opportunity today. And in fact, I want to immediately put the GoFundMe link for those who are following us now. The GoFundMe link is, of course, one of the ways, not the only way, but one of the ways. We have Cash App, and we hope to have something else soon to offer.
Yeah, we will. Maybe give us Go or Funly again.
And maybe even PayPal.
Oh, PayPal too.
Yeah, we need to speak tomorrow, and we're working on it. We're working on it, guys. We would like to give you even the PayPal opportunity. We have been removed, we think unjustly, from PayPal 6 times, but now, So thanks, Brooks. Thanks, Pina. These are the only 2 sponsors of today, but they are doing an excellent job in helping us carrying on this project. We are at episode number 18 of these exploring the Illuminati Occult, going deep into the Illuminati Occult. Hopefully we will be bringing you something that you don't know, something that you can then discover later on, maybe in more depth, thanks to my books. Today, of course, we will be touching on subjects which I've talked extensively about in Volume 3, in Invisible Master, and also in all my books, including Volume 5 and also Volume 7. So, I mean, we are discussing a very interesting subject today. So, first of all, for those who don't know what the Holy Grail is, we need to be really making an introduction here, no? And the introduction to the history of the Holy Grail, of course, brings us to these 2 stories. I mean, the Holy Chalice. It's a chalice which was apparently used, is in Christian tradition, that vessel that Jesus used in the Last Supper to serve wine. And of course, this is also referring to Jesus that then launched from there on this symbolic moment, which is then shared by Christians, sharing the blood of Christ as the wine and the Eucharist, and becomes all part of this covenant. And the use of wine and the chalice in the Eucharist in Christian Church is based on the Last Supper story. So then we have, though, in the late 12th century, an author, Robert Boron, who associated the pre-existing story of the Holy Grail, which basically was something that we saw appearing with a writer called Wolfram von Eschenbach, who composed this really successful epic poem called Parzival, based on the popular legend of King Arthur. And in this legend, there was also a connection that brings us to the Knights Templars, because there was the presence of these Templies, these warrior swans to castity, who helped the Fisher King keep watch in their temple over the Holy Grail. Now, they weren't really the Templars, but they were not even identical to the Templars, because the symbol was a turtle dove rather than the Crusaders' cross. But from that moment onwards, we have basically this link also with the Knights Templars. This link, which of course will find a revival later on, much closer to us, with the book The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail of Michael Bagent, Richard Leigh, and Ernie Lincoln, who were extremely successful with their books, The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, and also Messianic Legacy. And with these books, they touched on the subject of a secret society, the Priory of Zion, and also concluded that the legendary Holy Grail was simultaneously the womb of Mary Magdalene and the sacred royal bloodline that she gave birth to. Now, they didn't really invent this holy blood, the Holy Grail concept that already appeared in the 15th century. But first of all, Christy, you understand, this is basically a holy object that we have found then in Indiana Jones story, of course, picked up from Otto Rahn, and of course the obsession that the Nazis themselves had with the Holy Grail, because they wanted to place the Holy Grail, once they found the Holy Grail, at the center of that Wewelsburg castle downstairs in this contemplation of it. So you see,
in that evil place.
In that evil place. So first of all, let's specify that when the Holy Grail appeared in the Arthurian literature, it wasn't really the same cup of Christ, in the sense it wasn't the holy chalice. It was an object, a stone. It was not really specified what was this Holy Grail in the same way that it came later on. So when the Grail appeared initially in the Arthurian Grail concept, it wasn't still linked with the Joseph of Arimathea Last Supper cup, because it was Joseph of Arimathea who picked up this cup from the Last Supper and then apparently used it to catch Christ's blood at the crucifixion. And this object was actually an object that was discussed in the medieval times, but who appeared even earlier in history. It was discussed even earlier in history, in basically a few centuries earlier. They were already discussing the possibility of this Holy Grail visited in the Holy Land as a holy object that people used to in some way go to, because maybe these objects can bring you in some way, their benefits, just by touching them or being in contact with them or praying with them. There's always been this idea that certain object can facilitate almost the the contact with God. So the Holy Grail was this. But then in the 15th century, an English writer called John Harding invented a fanciful new etymology for the French Sang Graal, and then it became connected to Sang Graal, meaning royal blood. So that was when they connected it, and it became then later on connected to the hypothetical bloodline of Jesus. But it was then Robert de Boron who connected it with the Arthurian legends that didn't really specify what this holy object was. This holy object was not really specified, but then from Robert de Boron onwards, it became, the two things, the Holy Chalice and the Holy Grail became interwoven in one legend. And from that moment onwards, also connected to the Knights Templars. So this subject is definitely entrenched in a lot of mystery. There is a lot of talk about which is the real Holy Grail. Does somebody have this Holy Grail? Because there is a lot of speculation. Now, there is even a church in Valencia where they say they have the original Holy Grail. They keep it there. I can show you even the image, and it's kept in this church, and they claim that this is the real Holy Grail.
So they say they have it?
They say they have it. But a lot of people since then have claimed that the Holy Grail instead is an object different from this, because this, of course, seems a rather fancy object for somebody at the time of Jesus to have this kind of cup. Instead, there is other kind of cups that seems more realistic. And here we arrive to the cup of Rocco Zingaro and the Knights Templars. Now,
hey, I recognize that name.
And of course, this is the one which I'm going to show you. Now, there used to be this Grandmaster, Rocco Zingaro. He basically was leading a Templar order. And he said that for his wedding, he received as a gift, actually he did, from Egypt, this little cup that basically he claimed was the real Holy Grail. This is it. And this is the one that basically then Antonio Montuoro, who had this, Antonio Leonardo Montuoro, who Christie met, was basically a representative of the Vatican intelligence. He wanted to, when you claim you have the Holy Grail, there is a lot of different Holy Grails. I mean, we have then the other one connected to Alfesta, Padre Pio. How many Holy Grails? Okay, each one has a story, and of course, this is Rocco Zingaro that shows his Holy Grail, I think in the 80s here, to the Italian public. And this guy was taken very seriously by the Vatican, mostly because he was also the Grand Master. See here, he has the cup in his hand.
It's so little.
Yeah, but the one, actually, even the other one from Padre Pio was that small. These are very small. They were in use back in the days of Jesus. They had that kind of ceramics, the kind of...
I thought there was a fly around here.
Vade retro, Beelzebub, the Lord of Flies. We cast you away. Okay, so I'm trying here to make you understand the connection here. And also the very weird experiences that I lived myself, and even Christie, with this Holy Grail. So when it comes down to Rocco Zingaro basically came in contact with Antonio Leonardo Montuoro. Let's explain to the people this Antonio Leonardo Montuoro character, because this guy who worked with Marinelli is a bit of a crook, somebody typical Jesuit agent. Now, he had a retirement home. in Loreto, very holy place. In this retirement home, of course, he welcomed people of proven faith that he also was interested in some way in kind of keeping them, close guarded them, because this place was heavily guarded with cameras, things, and all the rest. And at one point, Rocco Zingaro, when his wife died, didn't have a place to stay any longer. He was still in charge of his Knights Templars, but he needed a place. And then Leonardo Montuoro offered him to go to this retirement home. Now, in this retirement home, there was also another interesting figure, American called Tom Zimmer, the Hermit of Loreto. Now, this
the Hermit of Loreto. Okay.
Yes. Now, the Hermit of Loreto is a very interesting figure because he is the one who basically prophesies in the early 80s that Donald J. Trump will arrive to the White House and will become president. Oh. So this premonition, let's say, that Tom Zimmer had was then very much out of place in the early 90s when the millionaire playboy of New York, Donald J. Trump, was not really a saint or anybody who we thought could get to the White House. So what happened next is that, of course, then this Zimmer guy in 2008, I think, goes back to America to live the last remaining part of his life in America. He wanted to come back to Loreto, but he does in 2009. He had made this prophecy, apparently. And so we have, though, a testimony about this whole thing in a video. I'm going to show you just some elements of this video that might be of interest, of course, told by a Catholic priest.
In light of current events that have been taking place recently, there's a story I wanted to share with you, a true story. And it has to do with a friend of mine who's a medical doctor. He's a psychiatrist. His name is Claude Curran. Actually, his mother was Calabrese, his father was Irish, and his name is Dr. Claude Curran. I got to know Dr. Claude Curran when I was at a Lady of Mount Carmel in Bristol, Rhode Island, in my first assignment. He had studied in Rome and met his wife there, who was a neurologist in medical school. They had married in Frosinone, her hometown, and then the couple moved to Bristol to raise their family, and they have 5 children. So one day, about 17 years ago, when I was at my first assignment in Bristol, I was talking to him about going to Rome. I told him I was going to be visiting Rome. And he said to me, "Father, listen, I really want you to do something when you're in Rome. I want you to get on a train, and I want you to go up to Loreto." And he said, "I'll pay for the train ticket, I'll pay for your expenses, but you've got to go to Loreto." Now, as he was saying this, I was thinking, okay, I know Our Lady of Loreto. It's a very important Christian site for we Catholics. It is actually the house of the Blessed Virgin Mary is in Loreto. The house where the Blessed Mary grew up, where she received the message of the angel Gabriel, and actually the incarnation of our Lord took place in this house in Loreto. Now, why is it in Loreto? It's in a northeastern Italian town and not in Nazareth. Well, the house, of course, was in Nazareth, where Our Lady was born and raised. But during the Muslim invasions, the Muslims were threatening to destroy the house of the Incarnation. So angels lifted up the house, and angels brought the house to where it is now in Loreto. Archaeologists have looked at this house, they have examined it, and they found that it is truly a first century house that would have been built in Nazareth, considering...
Now, first of all, he talks about angels. In reality, we can say that this house was transported not by angels but by the Templars, who were involved in the Crusades and who picked up literally piece by piece the place where Jesus was born and brought it to this place in Italy. I want to just specify that. Of course, the church and of course this priest tends to believe in the literal, description that the angels picked up the house and lifted in the air and brought it all the way. But that's not the case.
Materials that were there at the time in which it was constructed. Pollen on the house indicates that there are only flowers that would have been in bloom around that time in Nazareth. So it is authentically a Nazarene first century house. And as we Catholics, of course, believe, as I said, it was transported by angels to Loreto to protect it from Muslims. So
this, of course, it's just a brief description of Loreto. Maybe we can go more into the Hermit of Loreto, but just to summarize, because we don't have an enormous amount of time here, the Hermit of Loreto made this prophecy about Trump, and then Antonio Leonardo Montuoro decided that this cup had to go to Donald J. Trump if he was re-elected in 2020. Sadly, it didn't happen, so the cup never came to America, and it was never gifted to Donald J. Trump. This is basically just to give you summarize the whole thing. Today, we also saw, of course, a very strange episode happening during the coronation with this grim figure now passing by. Look like Mr. Death.
The Grim Reaper.
Mr. Death. That wasn't probably a good omen for King Charles, but King Charles and his family claims to have also a link to the bloodline of Jesus through the Lion family that claims ancestry through all the way to King David. So there is this element also of course, of importance. Regarding the Holy Grail, like I said, there has been very different experiences I had myself, but there is also many different claims about this object. Regarding Montuoro's one, I was never able to physically see it, because you remember Montuoro always had it in a safe and never showed it to us. But he actually also claimed he had the ashes of Jacques de Molay. Now, here we're not talking about some crazy man. We're talking about a guy who in Italy is, especially because he works with the Vatican, is taken very seriously. I talk very much about what...
Princess Kaoru.
Yes, I have a photo here of Princess Kaoru with Montuoro, just after, actually, I think just after the death of Rocco Zingaro, or maybe a few months before, but because Rocco Zingaro then died, I think, in early 2012. Yeah, when we went to that church mass, it was, I think, February 2012.
Oh, that was for that?
Yes, it was for Rocco Zingaro. Yes.
But who was the one that fell off the mountain?
That was another guy. That was Bishop Sigalini, who was also connected to this whole thing of the Holy Grail, because Montuoro wanted to construct a temple in Palestrina, if you remember, and he started the construction of this massive construction where they wanted to place this holy object. At the same time, I had a different experience with the Holy Grail instead of Alfesta. Alfesta claimed himself also to have a Holy Grail of different origin, while the origin of the Holy Grail of Rocco Zingaro was actually asserted, though, also by the fact that it received an exam by Don Verzé, who was a very controversial, famous figure of the Catholic Church, who had this hospital, this center in Milan, and who actually was given, this is a document that basically Verzé received on the 6th of March 2000, this, after a holy ceremony, this cap from the Knights Templar of the Supremus Militaris Templi Sororami Ordo, to then have basically do some, they said that we are giving it back. It says we have done the exams at the San Raffaele di Milano, which is a very famous hospital and place. So they made a, it says also, they also made a divine test, which we don't understand what this divine test is, but I mean, this is signed by Rocco Zingaro when he got it back. And then he said, it's now in the availability of the Grand Preceptor, who was him, so he can donate it to the American people, Popolo Americano. So the idea of donating it to the American people was there also a long time before Trump came along.
Why do they want to give it to the Americans?
Well, it seems like what they claim is that porterà la pace, that this object could bring peace in the world, to the, and so the American, only with the American people, peace in the world that could come by, because America is the superpower that detains that kind of power in the world. So here, of course, today we are discussing a topic that is very unusual, a topic that a lot of you probably don't know much about. We thank our sponsors, of course, who make possible this broadcast, that, of course, are a labor of love, because we needed to work many hours to put together each show and make it also entertaining, because, of course, here we're not at a university lecture. We are on YouTube, and we hope to reach more people possible. The importance of exploring the occult side of the Illuminati is this, that we are really bringing you unusual subjects, but with ample evidence. And so let's move further in understanding the role of this object. Now, I had another encounter after, of course, the one with Montuono and Rocco Zingaro, because then Rocco Zingaro died. I went to his funeral. I was invited to his funeral. I went there, and there was also Caldirola. There was my mother even. There was all kinds of people. I talk about it in volume 3 of my Confessions. But then there is another Holy Grail that comes into my life a couple of years later, maybe not even a couple of years later, a year and a half later, when I meet this guy called Alfesta, whose great uncle was the doctor of Padre Pio. Now, Alfesta had received all this material from his great uncle that the Vatican, after approved as legitimate material from the saint with the stigmata. Even myself, I have a piece of his bandages of Padre Pio here with the actual authorization of the Padre Post of the Franciscan monks. Now, in the Franciscan monks, apparently, there was a member of the Franciscan monks who received from Padre Pio this Holy Grail. But it's a different Holy Grail from the one we've been just discussing now, the one that instead is still kept to this day in Loreto, in the in the place where Montoro has this.
I have a
Yes.
question. Is there anybody else in the world who thinks they have the Grail, or is this like is it legit?
No. We're talking about very few people who claim they have the Holy Grail, because, like I said, there is one in Valencia who they claim, but then there is no others that we really have any. We have very few people that can claim they have the Holy Grail, of course, and can be taken seriously. When, just to close on the Holy Grail of Montuoro and of Rocco Zingaro, Hans Kovenbach, the past general of the Jesuits himself, tried to verify the authenticity, and in the end was kind of left wondering, because it actually was a cap from the from that period. But then, how we know it's actually Jesus, because then this cap apparently has also some blood in it, and especially this blood is present in the other cap, which I visioned and I kissed, which was instead the one of Padre Pio, and this was discussed, of course, by the news also in Italy, because there was a lot of information given in the news when they discovered that Alfesta didn't receive it directly from his great uncle, but actually from a monk who was in the same thing as Padre Pio. And it was actually sold to him, apparently, by the family of this monk. And he
said he got it straight from Padre Pio?
Initially he was taken very seriously because of his connection with Padre Pio. But then later on, he actually, this mysterious cap was proven. It actually, there was a member of the monastery of Padre Pio that said that the cap was genuine. However, there was then a letter that surfaced that was a little bit doubtful. But what is said here is this, basically, that from Peter to Padre Pio, a series of people transmitted this cap. Now, the thing is, of course, the cap would have been more genuine if it went into the hands of directly from the great uncle to Alfesta. But the thing is that Alfesta wanted to simply acquire it, and it was made possible for him to acquire it because of who he was. Mm-hmm. And so I viewed the cap. I saw the cap. The cap was analyzed. The cap was actually brought to me one night. All hell broke loose after that night. So I don't know. I mean, it definitely has a very strong energy.
For real.
I saw the blood inside, darkened, of course. We're talking about 2,000 years old, hypothetically, allegedly blood. Which apparently, it's genuine, this whole thing, and there is also very many stories behind it, because Ratzinger wanted this cap, offered money to Alfest. Alfest was offered 300,000 euros, then Alfest refused. There was a lot of different stories regarding this Holy Grail. So which is the real Holy Grail, though? We have too many Holy Grails. One of them needs to be...
Yeah, there's only one.
There's only one, no? We might never have seen the real Holy Grail, because then there is another story, the story of Otto Rahn, which I talk about in The Invisible Master. Otto Rahn, and of course the story of the Nazis that went after the research of Otto Rahn, who died in mysterious circumstances just before the beginning of World War II. And Otto Rahn went and searched for the Holy Grail in Montsegur, where there were these caters, these heretics, these Christian heretics, who were destroyed by the Catholic Church, but were said to keep to have this Holy Grail. So this is also another story, and it's actually the story of Otto Rahn is the one more close to the Indiana Jones kind of thing that, you know, is kind of depicted in fiction in one of the Indiana Jones movies. Let's see more of this Grail quest in connection to Tom Zimmer and Donald J. Trump from the words of this priest.
All that history about this beautiful house, but he said to me, Father, I know the house is beautiful and I want you to see it, but there's another reason why I want you to go there. There's a guy who's there, his name is Tom Zimmer. I want you to meet Tom Zimmer. Now, Tom Zimmer is a man who he's not a priest, he's not a religious, he's not a brother, but he decided, he's an American, but he decided that this house is so powerful and so important to Christendom and so important for prayer that he was going to be a hermit there. He was going to leave everything behind in America, move to Loretto, and live near this house and stay in this basilica that's built around this house. He was going to stay near this house day and night and pray and attend all the masses every day that was said in this basilica that surrounds the house of the Blessed Virgin Mary. So, very fascinating man. I wanted to meet him. So, I do as Dr. Curran said. I got on a train. I went up to Loretto. Beautiful scenic ride on the way up. It's along the Adriatic side of Italy. I reach the basilica. I go in the basilica. It's a beautiful basilica. And the house is right there, built, the basilica is built right around the house. I went up to the house, I said a prayer, and then I looked for Tom. And I remember saying to Dr. Curran, how am I going to find him? I'm just going to go to Loretto. He said, believe me, walk around and you'll find him. Sure enough, there was an elderly man who was very frail, very thin, who was leaning up against the fence that surrounds the house. And I went up to him, and in English, I said to him, are you Thomas? And he looked up at me and he said, yes, I am, in English. So I said to him, I'm Dr. Claude Curran's friend. He's our mutual friend. And he looked and he said, yes, I know him very well. Have a seat. So I was in my collar, and he was sitting on the floor. So I sat on the floor and I sat next to him. So as I was sitting next to him, he was a really beautiful man, very, very holy. He was teaching me a lot of beautiful things. Actually, he is the creator of the book called the Pietà. It's the blue book, the blue prayer book that has the picture of the Pietà and on the cover, and it has all beautiful prayers in it. It's called the Pietà. I strongly recommend you get that book. It sold over 10 million copies, this book that he authored. So, years later, only a few weeks ago, I'm talking to Dr. Curran, and he says to me, Father, remember that guy Tom Zimmer that I told you to go see in Italy many years ago? And I said, yes, of course, how could I forget what a holy man he was? And Dr. Curran said to me, listen to this about what happened between Tom and I in the 1980s. Dr. Curran said that in the 1980s, he was talking to Tom Zimmer, and Tom Zimmer said to him, Claude, there's a man right now who I believe in the future is going to lead America back to God. So Claudio said, who is this? Who is this guy? And Tom Zimmer said, the man who's going to, in the future, lead our country back to God is Donald J. Trump. And Dr. Curran said, you mean the New York Playboy? Like, this is the guy? And Tom Zimmer said, believe me, I have a premonition that this is the man who's going to do it in the future. So what Thomas did is, at that time, John Paul II opened the holy doors of the Vatican, of St. Peter's Basilica. And when he opened the holy doors for that year, it was for the whole year, when the doors are ready to close, the Vatican allows people to donate bricks that go inside the door, and you could put an inscription on the bricks of any intention you want. And those doors are closed and they're sealed, and they're not open until the next time the Vatican, the Pope decides to open the doors for another holy year. So they're shut sealed, and all of the intentions that are on those bricks are prayed during the holy sacrifice of the Mass at the Vatican, at St. Peter's. All the Masses that the Pope says, all the prayers that are prayed, are all for the intentions of the inscriptions that are on these bricks. Tom Zimmer, in the 1980s, donated a brick to be put in the holy door of the Vatican that said Donald J. Trump. And he did that because he wanted those masses in the Vatican to be said for him, because he knew that in the future this man was going to be a great leader of America and bring Americans back to God. And look at just yesterday at Donald Trump's rally.
So here, of course, we have an account of this story that somehow is connected to the Holy Grail, because, like I said, this Tom Zimmer was staying with Rocco Zingaro in the same place where Rocco Zingaro was basically staying later on in his life in Loreto, and met, of course, Tom Zimmer and spent time with him. Now, this is an image of Rocco Zingaro, the Grand Preceptor, the Grand Master of this Neo-Templar Order, with Father Max Anselmi in Loreto on September 23rd, 2008. So just, and he had been there for some years, and of course he met with Tom Zimmer. And this Holy Grail then was said to, maybe in the future, would be gifted to Donald J. Trump if he was re-elected. However, like I said, the Holy Grail is also, like some said, a esoteric idea that can be also worked as a symbolic allegory. That of course it's a different. Some people said here, so the Grail can also be symbolical. Sure, it can, and in fact, I explained that also in my books. The fact that it can be symbolic for your own personal quest for divine knowledge. So for me, actually, to encounter at times in my life.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times does that happen to a person?
No, it doesn't happen that often. It doesn't happen that often. And then there is this connection also with the Knights Templars. And of course, that night when I saw the Holy Grail of Padre Pio, I went there with a bunch of Templar Grandmasters, Marcello, and many others from the Vatican, from the middle of the night, where we met in the Vatican. So, I mean, it is definitely always there, this Holy Grail. It's kind of like always present in one way or another, either as a reality, as an allegory, as an hypothesis, as a possibility. The fact that they wanted to build that whole temple around it in Palestrina, and they wanted actually Princess Kaoru to help them with the financing. I mean, a lot of people will not believe all the adventures that even me and Christy went through in that period of time. You remember that great dinner that Caldirola gave, and there was a lot of important personalities that intervened. And of course, now Caldirola is no longer with us, but he was this eccentric marquise who lived this very particular life.
Was that the night the guy fell off the guy?
Well, no. Then there
mountain?
then there was Sigalini. Now the guy, you said you're always talking about this guy who fell off the mountain. So let's go and check out who we're talking about, because the guy who basically was pushed off the mountain was a bishop who gave this interview also to Princess Kaoru while she was there. They had this interesting chat. I have a photo of it. I think the day before he was thrown off a cliff of a mountain.
Did he die?
No, he didn't die.
Oh, okay.
He didn't die, actually. He survived.
I remember when he was in the hospital.
Yeah, I remember. And it was definitely an attempt, a murderous attempt of some kind.
But why do you want to kill him?
Here it's me, watch Caldirola. and Sigalini, next to Sigalini. See?
Oh yeah, there you
At
are.
the mast in honor of Rocco Zingaro, the guy who had the Holy Grail, who claimed to have the Holy Grail. So why they want to kill him? Well, they wanted to kill him because I think that this whole thing was attracting a lot of unwanted, maybe attention. It was weird what happened, because you remember he was supposed to come to that dinner and suddenly he didn't come because he had this accident while he was going in pilgrimage on top of a mountain.
Was Princess Cora there?
Princess Cora was at the dinner, but she didn't go on top of the mountain at the pilgrimage, La Santissima, there wherever they went. And I mean, it was a weird...
I think she pushed him off the mountain.
No.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, no. Princess Cora was actually invited because they thought of her like a facilitator that knew all these important people that could maybe bring finances for this project that was built around this Holy Grail.
But then she got a letter when she got home to Japan, and they threatened her. And so then she backed out.
Not only a letter. Apparently, she said that an helicopter arrived on top of her while she was doing meditation on the beach or something, and they scared the hell out of her. I mean,
didn't Benjamin Fulford say she was running around naked and the helicopter was chasing her?
Some weird story. I mean, it was weird. But from that moment onwards, Princess Cora really changed.
Yeah, she did.
She changed because there was the involvement of Princess Cora with Kim Jong-un, and the fact that the Vatican...
You're blowing everybody's mind now.
Yeah, no. What they want, basically, the guys who claimed they had the Holy Grail in the Vatican, who was Antonio Leonardo Montoro with Marinelli, who used to be the head of the security for John Paul II, known as the General. Marinelli wanted to bring Kim Jong-un to the Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually through Princess Cora.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that American intelligence liked that very much.
Mm-mm.
So I guess that's where the scare came, definitely. Now, we said that there is also this more esoteric interpretation of the Holy Grail. There is also the other interpretation connected with an hypothetical bloodline. And of course, there is a bunch of movies, but also there is the Da Vinci Code that stole this whole concept from Michael Bagent and the other guys, who then brought Dan Brown to court, but sadly lost it, because in reality, the content of the Da Vinci Code seems to be pretty much taken from the Messianic Legacy and the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, these books of that Michael Bagent, these other guys did. And but regarding the Priory of Zion also, it's actually a more recent organization. It wasn't like established hundreds of years ago. And this whole thing also about the confrontation with the Knights of Malta that they claim in this book, the Holy Blood, the Holy Grail, was then transformed in the book of Dan Brown in the confrontation with the Opus Dei.
Yeah.
No? So definitely there was some copying from, and that's why Dan Brown was brought to court. But Dan Brown was obviously extremely influential. He had made by that time millions and millions and millions of dollars, and could afford probably the best lawyers in the United Kingdom, and so they never won. Today we are discussing the Holy Grail. We are discussing, of course, various stories concerning the Holy Grail. We also wanted to discuss stories that were closer to us historically. No, when we discussed when it comes down to the Holy Grail that Padre Pio had, apparently this Holy Grail that was transmitted through various people, included also apparently Saint Francis at one point. So the thing is that this Grail then, I think, all these grails become an attraction also for the evil side, for the satanic side, for the spiritist, for the occultist, for the, no? In fact, even Alfesta was a guy who was dwelling.
He was completely a guy who was dwelling in the dark side.
Absolutely. And I mean, it was pretty clear he was, but at the same time, he had all this connection with a saint like Padre Pio. And he had, of course, he was very ambiguous, no? But then also the fact that he didn't give.
I don't like that guy.
Absolutely. He was a very, very weird kind of figure. Very weird kind of figure. But all these figures are really involved in this. So, I mean, then you have, like, René Le Chateau. René Le Chateau, people think René Le Chateau, of course, the Da Vinci Code, the Priory of Zion. In reality, it's a very different story, but there is connection to a secret society. And of course, there is a connection with Freemasonry. There is various connections, but when, for example, just like I explained in volume 4 of my Confessions, this Asmodeo, this demon at the entrance that holds the holy water at the entrance of this church, René Le Chateau, was destroyed by a Muslim woman just a few years ago. Then the Templars had to actually intervene to pay for it. And the guy who signed this big check that they made a big spectacle of it was actually Jean-Pierre Giudicelli.
Really?
Of course. So Jean-Pierre collected the money that then was used for the reconstruction of the damaged this is, when you go in a church, at the entrance you have the holy water, and this woman had destroyed, but many churches have been damaged in France in the last few years, sadly, by the Muslims. They said that the Notre Dame Cathedral was not set on fire by anybody, that was just an accident, but there is even doubts that's true. However, Christy doesn't like these people because she saw how evil some of them were.
Well, I had some bad things happen.
So
I don't want to say.
No, but first of all, Montuoro was definitely a manipulator. Somebody.
It was just such a horrible time. It was one of the worst times in my life, to tell you the truth.
Which one? The one when it comes to Montuoro, the one come to the other one, to Alfesta?
I don't know all of it.
I think, though, that it's quite strange. It's quite strange how these holy grails end up in the hands of people who shouldn't really have anything sacred in their hands.
Montuoro was really a creepo.
Yeah.
I went outside. I was with Rambo, and I went outside and I saw Holy Mary, and so I was standing there and I was praying, and then I saw him, and we looked at each other, and like I get feelings about people, and I had such a bad feeling about him, and it was when he was still supposed to be like this good guy, and so I get like these bad feelings about people that are supposed to be good, but then luckily, I mean, it's kind of like I have this premonition thing, because then I'm able to warn you about them. So and then I warned him. I said, that guy's a creep, and so are all the ones around him. They're all creeps, and they were.
Like when I told,
but it didn't really help us at all, because I mean, we still went through all of it, so. But
you still have to go through the motions, I guess. Yeah. I mean, otherwise I will have nothing to write in my books, though.
Yeah, it gave you a lot to write about.
But Alfesta also, I mean, it was.
And he was obsessed with me.
He was a weird figure, weird guy, really weird creep.
He did like music videos, rock music videos. He's really weird.
But he was also, like you said, a guy with occult inclinations. I think this is the thing, it's like the Nazis when they went after the Holy Grail. It's like it attracts a lot of people who want to use this object, this holy object, but they want to use it in a twisted way.
Yeah.
They want to.
They take like the most holy relic that we could possibly behold, and then whatever they do, they try to ruin it. They can't, though. But I mean, they just put it in their satanic hands and try to manipulate it with their satanic things. I don't know.
Then but holy objects of blood, for example, like somebody here in the chat is saying a lot of relics have been stolen, and the blood of Pope John Paul II was stolen from Spoleto. I wrote about it in Zagami.com, and I think I actually even wrote about it extensively in regards to the one world religion in volume 7, because it's connected also to that Fratelli Tutti encyclica. So yes, the Satanists like holy relics, but it's not only the Satanists, the Freemasons like holy relics, and that's why the group of Thebes was founded in the 80s in France, in what is the Temple of the Grand Orient of France. This group of Thebes was born, and there were various occultists involved, and they basically wanted to do the same thing the SS and Herb wanted to do, just gather occult relics and use their powers for magical rituals. It's like they want, it's like Alfesta was claiming he wasn't a Satanist, but he admitted that the Satanists had actually both.
But then he does black magic.
But then also he claimed that the guy who used to work with Efrem Del Gatto, the guy from Navona 2000, this occult group in Italy, bought a villa in front of him only because he wanted to be close to the relics of Padre Pio that he owned. So it's like they need these relics and to empower their temples, their rituals, their evil work. It seems that is what the Illuminati, but also the SS wanted to do. So it gives you an idea. That's why the whole thing in Indiana Jones, the Ark of the Covenant, but also the Holy Grail, these are holy objects that shouldn't be in any way used for their own purpose, no? Yeah. But like we see in Indiana Jones, the Nazis wanted to use them for them being able to have complete and total power over everybody. So I think that that is the main problem here is
they want like so much power, they have such huge egos, they want all this power over people, like tell people what to do. People love to tell people what to do. I mean, I understand that. Don't tell me what to do. I'll tell you something if you do.
But yeah, that's true. But also, a society needs to be orderly conducted, and so there can't be complete chaos and anarchy. So I guess there has to be a minimum of obedience of certain principles, like, for example, the Constitution.
Well, of course,
and of course, we have always. Seen also here in America very much a connection with Freemasonry and with the Knights Templars from the very arrival of Christopher Columbus, who said they used old Templar maps, who might have been here in America even earlier. A lot of people give importance, though, especially to these treasures, these holy grails, this in the materialistic realm, yeah. While instead there is a much more important quest, which is a spiritual quest. So the spiritual quest of the Holy Grail is a completely different thing, and of course it's something that goes beyond the accounts that come from the 7th century Anglo-Saxon world. Because even before the medieval times, we had in the 7th century the account of Arculf, who was this Frankish bishop who toured the Levant in around 680 after Christ, he mentioned the veneration of this relic in the Holy Land. So there was definitely something that was worshipped. So the actual the fact that there was a chalice, and then of course we have the chalice that we found in the Cathedral of Valencia, that is purportedly from around the 1st century AD, and celebrated by none other than Pope Benedict XVI in 2006. And he says this is this most famous chalice. He actually said it in Latin, unc preclarum calicem. So there was almost a recognition. There is another one also, the Sacro Catino in Genoa, that is also a Roman Catholic cathedral in the city of Genoa, and that is the seat of the Archbishop of Genoa, that for the last 1,000 years has had this flat dish made of green glass, who was identified as the Holy Chalice towards the end of the 13th century. So there is many cups or grails of various kinds that are kept in various places. But then we have also the spiritual quest, and the also, I say, occultistic hermetical interpretation of the Grail, like Crowley's interpretation, that was completely, of course, connected with his sexual magical rites, with his the cup being receiving, like the female receiving the male. No, there was this sexual magic interpretation of the Holy Grail. There was, of course, the Parzival assumed a lot of importance with Wagner. Wagner became the soundtrack of the Nazis, so it kind of pushed, and in my latest book I talk about Wagner and his importance of Richard Wagner in Nazism, but also in sexual magic, in the development of sexual magic, of the OTO, with Theodor Reuss, who as a young guy used to go to visit Richard Wagner, and who was present at the first of the Parzival when it was launched. So you see, all these things are interconnected, because then the Parzival becomes the inspiration for evil, not only good things. We have basically the inspiration for the OTO, their sexual magical Masonic academy, the inspiration for the Nazis and their SS and Himmler, who bought a castle. We talked about Westenburg Castle, where he actually, you see at the center of that room we showed downstairs, that space, that's where they wanted to place the Holy Grail. Yeah. So it is definitely something that has inspired also a lot of negative forces, mostly because I think it attracts like a magnet every hope to be occultist in the world. This hypothetically, they like to have a link with Jesus and with his power. Jesus, of course, is for Christians the embodiment of God on earth, the Son of God, the Logos of God, and so they want to have some of it. They want to grasp the miracles that Jesus somehow worked out through his life, were superior to any hocus pocus that Simon Magos or other people after him tried to. So there is also psychologists, people like that saw in the Grail legend some elements that can be interpreted as symbols, and were expanded on interpretations originally given by Carl Jung. But also, like we discussed in the past, Carl Jung himself was somehow connected to the OTO, to that whole group of people in Mount Verita. There was some. So the fact that we have a relic is one thing, but also you have a whole school of thought that is connected not so much with the relic, but more with the symbolism, rather than the conspiracy theories or the pseudo history. It has inspired a lot of art. That's for true. I mean, Richard Wagner's final musical drama, The Parsifal, premiered in 1882, and inspired on this Grail, but also directly inspired, connecting it also with female fertility.
That's what I was going to ask you, because I heard that maybe it was from the Da Vinci Code.
No, but
they say it was like
the Da Vinci Code had also some kind of that gives you an idea of the divine feminine kind, no? In the end, also. And then we have, of course, the presence of the Holy Grail in literature, T.S. Eliot's poems, The Wasteland. We have many other important present. The Grail is present in Umberto Eco's novel Baudolino. It's really infinite, the amount of influence it had on the cinema and the media, because we have even Monty Python and the Holy Grail, if we want to go into the more sarcastic, comedy-like take on the Arthurian Grail, and it was also adapted as a stage play later on. And then we have, of course, the film from 1981, where I remember going to the cinema, Excalibur. It was a big film back then, and it gave this traditional heroic interpretation of the Arthurian tale, with the Grail is revealed as a mystical mean to revitalize Arthur from his depressive sickness. And then we have, of course, like we said, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. There is many other movies that have, and there is even songs. Even Jay-Z did a song, Holy Grail. I mean, but regarding Jay-Z, of course, I will say that you need to go and check out my book, Confessions of an Illuminati Volume 8, so you know what we are talking about here. You know that Katy Perry was wondering, like a fool lost today, invited at the coronation. I mean, how can Katy Perry be invited at the coronation? But the Katy Perry, who we have also seen very much connected to Illuminati symbology at the Grammy Awards, and today she was wandering around for 10 or 15 minutes because she was trying to find her place amongst...
Did she find Orlando Bloom?
She was on her own. I saw her on her own. I mean, they made a thing about her not finding where she was going. I mean, completely lost with this demented hat on her head and stuff. But this also gives us once again a confirmation about the fact that today the only relevant monarchy is the British monarchy, and every single artist, from Lady Gaga bowing down to the Elizabeth II, to Mick Jagger, like I say in my book, Volume 8, Mick Jagger, who basically sympathy for the devil, but also at Her Majesty's Satanic Service with the Rolling Stones, and then being ignited by then Prince Charles, not by Elizabeth II. So that is also a very, very interesting aspect of it. And continuously, these artists seem to be connected to the British monarchy, because let's not forget, though, that EMI was a product of the military industrial complex of England, of Great Britain, of the United Kingdom, not of America. And EMI was a very powerful record label also. But we have always a very strong presence of the English in this business, show business world, because then you have to remember that in the end is the Brits, is England in particular, the United Knowledge of England, that controls worldwide Freemasonry. So worldwide Freemasonry and the patents, and they're all granted by the recognition is granted by England, and all the royal family is basically conducting and controlling the British Freemason, but then also by extension also the rest of the world, because you see, if you want to be a regular Freemason, you have to be recognized by the United Lodge of England. So it makes it there is this connection, and so I think that today we have definitely seen with the incoronation of Prince Charles, also, let's not forget, defender of the faith, but today he extended it to defender of the faiths, because of course we are talking about the coming Antichrist representing the faiths of this one world religion, agglomerate of all the faiths put together and control. Let's not forget that King Charles is the great resetter with Klaus Schwab. Is the guy who has promoted this great reset before everybody else. So we have definitely seen how the British royal family is still very powerful and is being left there as the only royals simply because they are connected with Freemason and they have this important role in Freemason. While instead, most monarchies were decimated. They were still, I don't know, 100 after the Second World War. Now there is maybe 25. I mean, we are basically seeing from in the last 200 years after the French Revolution, and this was a work of the Illuminati. The Illuminati wanted two things, Christy. Mm-hmm. Elimination of the monarchy and religion. The real monarchic figure, not the one only on paper or the one that says defender of faiths, but in reality is defending Freemasonry. It was a defender of Christian faith, a real Christian monarch. The Tsar was a defender of Orthodox Christianity. They hated him. They needed to eliminate him. And that's why they pushed communism into Russia. And the same can be said with a bunch of other royal families that were eliminated because the Illuminati wanted to eliminate religion and monarchy. And I explained this in volume 7 of my Confessions, especially in the last chapter, no?
Yep, that's a really good chapter.
That is a very important chapter. So people say, is Charles III the Christian? No, Charles III is somebody who has a kind of syncretic belief in he believes very much in the Muslim religion. I saw him myself connected to the Muslims in Konya. So he is very much connected to the Muslim world, but he's connected also to the Orthodox world of Patriarch Bartolomeo. He often goes, retires in Mount Athos with the monks. He basically is actually working along with the Vatican into the one world religion project. He's very much into that idea, no? The human fraternity project. Let's not forget also that the Theosophical Society was basically a product of Imperial Great Britain. It was okay. The Theosophical Society might seem, like it was born in America, but in reality, the Theosophical Society becomes established in England. It's an organization that is established in New York City in 1875 by Madame Blavatsky, but soon after becomes very important with the Theosophical Society Lodge in London. I was part of the Theosophical Society in London, so I know very much about, but the Theosophical Society in England is a very serious thing. And the Theosophical Society became basically a way, And in fact, there is, back in the fascist era in Italy, there was a heavy criticism towards Theosophical Society because they said that they were simply agents of Imperial Britain. And the Theosophical Society was the one that, with all those gurus in India, it opened up the Indian Hinduism, bringing it over here with all those gurus. India was an English colony, was a part of the Commonwealth, was part of the empire. When the Queen was coronated 70 years ago, India was still theirs, was still their territory.
That's crazy.
Basically, this is. I had myself, my great grandfather who was in India for working for the British Crown over there in some capacity, and so there is the Theosophical Society became then. Let's not forget, like I explained very well in my books, both Volume 7 and Volume 8. Theosophical Society becomes the playground of Satanism. Without the Theosophical Society, there would have not been modern Satanism. Aleister Crowley would never have had the immense network that he used and abused to spread the disease of anti-Christianity and telema. The same can be said. The same can be said for other followers of the Theosophical Society, including Michael Aquino, who who actually told me personally he was a follower of the Theosophical Society at the R in India. So here we have the British Crown. And of course, the fact that, because in the last chapter of this book, I talk about King Charles. I show him. And why do I talk about? I'm going to show you now why I talk about King Charles. Because King Charles is basically the figure that for many years had as an assistant, as an advisor, the worst pedophile in history, which is Jimmy Savile.
That guy.
Jimmy Savile used to write the speeches for Prince Charles.
That's crazy.
So you see, we have King Charles now III, who has definitely a lot of skeletons in the cupboard with Jimmy Savile. We have Prince Andrew, who was booed on his way to the church, but even Prince Harry was booed, and both of them were put in third row, completely distant. Harry looked like he was completely.
Meghan ruined him.
Meghan ruined him, whatever. But in any case, they really ruined. These are like one worse than the other. They're all. It's incredible. This whole thing, in my book, I make the claim that either Prince Charles, now King Charles III, or the future King William, they're definitely both candidates to the office
of the Antichrist.
Office of the Antichrist. No, not only Prince. I keep calling him at times Prince Charles. King Charles III was not only the best friend of Jimmy Savile, but Jimmy Savile used to write speeches for Prince Charles. He used to be invited. He had the free entrance in court. He could do whatever he wanted.
So you think he knew he was a pedophile? Do you think that King Charles now, but Prince Charles then knew that Jimmy Savile was a pedophile? Do you think he knew?
Listen, obviously.
Because if he knew, then how could he just I
know, it's insane. But of course he knew. He was with him until he died, and then there was no investigation on Jimmy Savile there was complete no investigation. It was prohibited to access.
Well, he's dancing a jig in hell right now, so
it was you
can get away with it all you want on this dimension.
And let's not forget. He was protected by what is known as the Privy Council. His Majesty's Most Honorable Privy Council is basically a body of advisors to the Sovereign of the United Kingdom, and they are all very important figures. The Judicial Committee consists of senior judges. Then this Privy Council is the one that controls, basically advises the sovereign, issues royal charters. It has it's basically, to some extent, it's being replaced by the cabinet of the United Kingdom, which is a more political and modern thing, but it's still there. And in this Privy Council, Jimmy Savile had an important role. I mean, when we're talking about Jimmy Savile, we're talking about the biggest pedophile of all time, who even took the eye of, I think, the Chris, like a fake eye that one of these dead people that he actually had sex with. He was into necrophilia and made a ring out of it. I mean, disgusting things. How can Charles not know about his best friend thing when he was going in and out? I mean, Jimmy Savile was knighted also by John Paul II. So, here we have best friend of Charles.
Everybody's a criminal. Everybody's corrupt. That's it. They're all a bunch of crooks.
He knew very well who was his best friend, his advisor. Satanic symbol, I remember, found in the ground of the Queen some time ago. There was some kind of they found some satanic symbol, and there was definitely this other link to witchcraft, to Druidism. When the Queen got to become a monarch, she also was invested of a role with the recognition from the Druids. The Druids are the ones who meet every year at Stonehenge, but the Druids are also the ones who used to do human sacrifice, guys. So I mean, what? No, okay. I think that that today we went really deep into this whole thing, and definitely at their Satanic Majesty, Satanic Service. It was kind of like a prophetic, not like I said here in this in my book. King Charles theoretically has this King of Israel thing to some extent through what he claims is his ancestry, because of course the fact that King Charles the Third is not only a friend of Israel, but to some extent in his how you say lineage claims descendants from King David. Though I think that at the moment King Charles is a transitory king. I don't think King Charles is going to stay very long. I think that role will instead be of King William, of the future King William. We have also another thing that we need to say, that Prince Harry is definitely out of the picture. He even refused today to go to lunch with his father, picked up the plane and left.
God, that's just Meghan. All Meghan. He wanted to go to lunch with his dad.
Okay, and let's not forget then Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein. Prince Andrew being booed outside by a crowd that, of course, doesn't want Prince Andrew to be anywhere near the royals. He's not any longer a working royal. He's no longer welcome by anybody in Great Britain. And Jeffrey Epstein had that really particular temple in his island, which now apparently has been sold. Now that temple with the blue and white colors of Zion with apparently inside there was a very big library, and a piano was his study, let's say, but also a place where he will meet and discuss things with people like Prince Andrew and many Bill Clinton and other famous guests of the island, of course, surrounded by minors, by girls, underage girls.
Underage girls.
So, I mean, here we have Prince Andrew.
I saw so many things about that whole Epstein Island thing. I watched so many documentaries on that. Gosh.
So we
terrible.
We have Prince Andrew, who is with Epstein, pedophile. Then we have Prince Charles, pedophile with Jimmy Zari. I mean, there is no one. I mean, maybe
there's no one
apart from Prince William. Seems to be the most normal guy at the moment, as he seems to be the most normal one. But there is a lot of people who indicate him like maybe a guy with an evil twist. So let's see what's gonna happen. Christy, what do you think of the Holy Grail after all this? What is for you the Holy Grail?
What is for me the Holy Grail?
Yeah.
I just found it all very interesting.
I mean, why do you think everybody's obsessed with this cup that Jesus used in the Last Supper?
Why? Because it's a piece of Jesus that somebody can, you can actually see it and touch it, Well, it's a material thing. So, and something that
gave birth to the practice that we all see in every single church, where we have always a chalice that is always holding each church. Then you have the Eucharist that is kept in it. Mm-hmm. And then you receive that Eucharist and the blood and the body of Christ, and so it is definitely from this holy chalice that there is a lot to it's very important. So let me end today with the passage from the Gospel of Matthew 26, 27, 29. But I will get Christy to read it if you want. Now, what do you think? You want to read this passage? Okay.
Where is it?
Here.
And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink this, all of you, for this is my blood for the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I shall not drink again of the fruit of the wine until I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom."
Amen.
Oh,
and I see
my Father's
you.
Kingdom on earth.
Absolutely. And we will see you next week. Thank you so much to the sponsors of today's episode, Bruce and Pina. If you want to, of course, sponsor us, you have the GoFundMe. We have also the Cash App.
And if you don't have one of these wonderful books, pick one up. You can find them on Amazon. But they're really good. So
you find all this precious information in them. Today we cited from some of them, and there is definitely a lot of interesting.
Hi, Cynthia, my friendie from New York.
I think ultimately people don't need any physical object necessary as an intermediary between them and God. I think ultimately is you and your heart who have to be intermediaries with God. And
the more that you listen to God, and the more that you follow God's teachings and really live your life like that, the closer you will be to God, and the more of the guidance from God that you will receive. Because when you're following God's word and you're doing everything that God wants you to do, you're close to Him. So, and that's where you want to be. You want to be close to God, and when you're not close to God because you feel like crap. So,
God bless you all.
God bless you all. Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's all.
That's all, folks.
And a little bit more.